So Rick Kraus is also a SSGF alum. He was a fellow from 2008 to 2012 at Harvard University, working with Sarah Stewart on the shock behavior of geological materials. I think rock-ice mixtures, as I recall. Is that more or less right? Iron and, yeah, all rocks, yeah. Anyway, he joined Lawrence Livermore. He did his practicum at Lawrence Livermore, and he joined Lawrence Livermore in 2013, and then I think about a year later he converted to staff. So, Rick?
Great. Thanks so much, Tracy. So yes, I spent my practicum at Livermore, but that's only because I spent 2 summers at Los Alamos before that. So both are great places, all are great places. So in this talk, I'll describe how much of a worrier I am and try to put myself in your shoes 4 or 5 years ago when I was there and think about, what would I like to have learned about a postdoc experience in a national lab and how that equates to a career or potential career. So I'll talk about how I learned to stop worrying and really fall in love with the NNSA missions. So sitting in your shoes, I was probably worrying about my experiment, why I had to go back in the freezer and make more ice rock samples to shoot the gas gun, thinking about the simulations which weren't running because I only had access to a few nodes, and thinking about where I was going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. Do I want, what do I want? You've probably figured out what research you like. You probably really enjoy your thesis research, the summer practicum experiments, or maybe not so much. But you're probably trying to figure out, how do I make that into a career that really satisfies me on all levels? And you're probably trying to decide between academia, industry, where you can make a lot of money, and a job at the national labs. And you've all done really great. You're in this program, so you're probably going to have a lot of options. So the best advice I can give is to make sure you make an active decision in this. Don't take the path of least resistance. Try to find out what you really want to do. And that's what hopefully we're here to help with. So in preparing for this talk, I've not done a university postdoc. So I said, what can I find out about them? And I found this really sort of depressing article in Science magazine. And so I'll try to contrast with what an NSA postdoc is not. It's not a rite of passage. You don't necessarily have to do an NSA postdoc to get a career at the national labs. A number of very good people have been converted from grad students right into staff positions. But they're really important to do. They're not glorified lab technicians. Yes, it's true that you are the cheapest qualified labor at the lab, and so you're really important to us. But it's because we want to invest in the future. And we're thinking, what could you do for us, and how can you help the missions in the next 5, 10, 20 years? Lab conversion rates are much better than the dismal statistics of going from a postdoc in academia to a professor. I was really scared to see that was 1 in 7. So apparently 1/3 of all staff scientists are going to be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. So there's quite a bit of turnover. And so hopefully that gives you some feeling about job security, and you don't have to worry so much. And finally, that NNSA postdocs actually pay pretty well. You can afford to eat well while saving up. I bought a truck the day I was converted to a staff member, so that made me feel really good. And you can sort of live reasonably well. So what is the focus of an NNSA postdoc? I like to think about things in what are the short-term needs, and everyone is going to tell you, as a postdoc, you need to write papers. You need to make sure that you are looking for that next job that you can have. But there's also at the NNSA, we want to think, or at the labs, we want to think, what are the long-term developments from your research? So you want to have both a plan for getting those papers out, as well as, how is this can affect and help the laboratory in the near future. As a postdoc, I was always interested in understanding high pressure and high energy phase transitions. So in graduate school, I spent time at Z looking at impact-induced vaporization of iron and silica. And now as a graduate student, I've been thinking about, how can we understand very high pressure melting curves? So I developed a technique where, so if you have your temperature pressure phase diagram, where you high temperature you have your fluid phase, low temperatures you have your solid phases. And the blue line is the Hugonio, so this is the locus of shock states achievable by the passage of the shock wave. So we've developed a technique where we shock our sample into the high pressure temperature fluid phase, and then we send another ramp compression wave, which slowly isentropically compresses the material back across the solid into the solid stability field. And we probe it with in situ X-ray diffraction, asking when do we solidify along this isentrope. So I developed this technique at the Omega Laser Facility. Now it's being applied on a NIF Discovery Science proposal, which I got about 1.5 years ago with Russ Hemling. And we're taking it forward and moving into our HED and stockpile stewardship needs under one of Alan's programs. So finally, I'll end to say that these laboratory postdocs are an opportunity. They're an opportunity to do great science on some of the world's best facilities. People will sell, and this is one of the things that got me, people are saying, you can do amazing science on awesome facilities. It's totally true. This year, I have hydro experiments where I'm going to be blowing up about 60 pounds of HE to study materials. I have NIF experiments to study the high pressure melting curve of materials. I have Z experiments to study the high temperature pressure equation of state as well as the melting curve of materials, comparing across platforms. They're also your opportunity to interview the lab. You've done practicum, most of you have done practicums, and gotten a hint of what we do at the lab. As a postdoc, it's a little bit longer, and it's a better opportunity to do that. You're going to find out about the missions. Hopefully you'll find out about the mission space. Charlie talked about the stockpile stewardship missions, but there's also a lot of work being done in non-proliferation, counter-proliferation, and nuclear counterterrorism, which really make the labs their national security labs that they are today. You're going to find out if you like the process for big science. John Edwards talked about the ICF mission. There's hundreds and hundreds of people working on ICF. Not all of them, when they finally get ignition, not all of them are going to be on those final papers, but you're hopefully going to be happy about contributing to that without being on the paper because you helped that mission. And those are the types of ideas that you need to think about if you like those processes for big science. And finally, I think the postdocs are a great opportunity to learn about yourself as a scientist. You're going to find out if you're patriotic by nature. Do you like those missions? In the next 1, 2, or 3 years, you'll find out if you like your research being applied to national security missions. And you're going to find out if you want to answer the question, how can I help? And that's something that's really, really critical to maybe ask yourself now, if you're leaning towards that direction. So find me. I'm happy to talk about any of these things I've discussed today, or Samantha and I can answer any questions.